Hello, and welcome to today's Training Industry webinar, E-Learning Development, What You Need to Know to Scope and Build Successful Programs, sponsored by the Training Associates. I'm Amanda Longo, Creative Marketing Director here at Training Industry, and I'm very happy that you could join us for today's event. Before we get started, I have some tips and tricks to help you interact with our speakers and get the most out of today's program. Throughout today's event, please feel free to submit questions in the chat window, and we will address them as possible towards the end of the program. We also encourage you to share the information you received today with your colleagues and network via social media. Please use the hashtag TIWebinars and follow at TTA Training. Also, you can direct your attention to the handouts section of your control panel, where the sponsors have left some goodies for you today, including a copy of today's slide deck. When our program ends, you'll receive a short evaluation survey, and we would greatly welcome your feedback about today's event, speakers, topics for the future, or anything you'd like to share with us. As always, today's webinar will be recorded and archived on trainingindustry.com, and you will receive a follow-up email from us that will include a link to the on-demand program. Finally, should you have any technical troubles today, go ahead and copy down the telephone number you see in purple on your screen. That will take you to Citrix Tech Support. You can type in your chat pane, but I'm the only one answering, and I'm not very tech savvy, so go ahead and copy down that number now, just in case. If this is your first webinar with us, a very special welcome goes out to you. At Training Industry, we offer dozens of webinars each year on subjects ranging from authenticity in the workplace to micro-learning, innovation to change management, workforce development, and just about every topic relevant to leaders of training organizations around the globe. If you've attended one of our programs in the past, it's so great to have you back. Our objective in offering sponsored webinar programs is to allow our membership the opportunity to learn from the most innovative thought leaders in our industry. We hope that after today's program, you'll become a member too and share our resources with your coworkers, peers, and employees so that they can benefit from the same great information. We believe today's program is one that you'll find to be most useful. We will explore how to create engaging e-learning programs that meet your desired learning objectives. I'd like to go ahead and introduce you to today's speakers, Michelle Jackson and Marlene Saucier. Michelle is an experienced learning and performance consultant, intercultural educator, speaker, and trainer. She has more than 25 years of experience that combine instructional design and development, talent development, program management, and human resource management. She works with companies to determine, then implement performance solutions through visually appealing and interactive courses that deliver results. She has consulted in a variety of industries and holds a master's in international and intercultural management from the School for International Training in Vermont. Marlene has been in the field of human capital management since 1999. Since joining TTA in 2004, she has served in a variety of roles, including individual contributor and leadership roles in recruiting, operations, and sales. While managing operations and overseeing recruiting, she was responsible for developing a number of innovative recruiting practices that enabled TTA to provide the highest quality candidates at an unprecedented scale. She also led a team of recruiters for a 500 trainer project, the largest in the history of financial services. Today, Marlene is responsible for TTA's learning strategy practice. I know both Michelle and Marlene have a lot of great information to share with you today, so without any further ado, ladies, the mic is yours.
Thanks so much, Amanda. Building the culture of learning you want for your company doesn't have to mean hiring more staff. Discover why so many companies trust TTA to provide them with the expert learning and development talent to develop, offer, and run the workplace training they need in any learning modality. We've been named a top training outsourcing company for 8 consecutive years and a top IT training company for 4 consecutive years by trainingindustry.com. To learn more about TTA, please visit our website at www.thetrainingassociates.com. Take it away, Michelle.
Well, thank you, Marlene. And I want to say hi to everyone who's joined our webinar today, and thank you for joining. And it's great to see everybody here. So we're going to spend the next hour, as we divide it into 3 parts. First, we're going to share what key factors we look at and why we look at those key factors when determining the scope of a project. Second, we'll review 3 client case studies and how those key factors helped us estimate, then design and develop a program for each of those clients. And then third, we'll leave some time for Q&A at the end there. So I'd like to start with a question for you. What percentage of your learning programs are developed for e-learning? So you have 5 choices there. None right now, or 0%. We are dipping our toe in, 1 to 24% of your learning programs. We're off to a good start, 25 to 50%. Many of our learning programs are already e-learning, so 51 to 74%. And almost all of our learning programs are e-learning, so 75 to 100%. Select one of those there that most closely fits where you are at. And actually, if you answer none right now, could you please share in chat why you are not developing any e-learning programs at this time?
Excellent. The poll is open, and I see, Michelle, that there are tons of responses coming in. No open-ended yet, so get those in if you would like to. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, and here are your results.
Great. Okay, well, that looks pretty interesting. We have a few that are not developing e-learning programs, so hopefully today's webinar will really help you to scope those e-learning programs and get those started if that's part of your program ambition. We have almost pretty evenly divided between we're dipping our toe in, we're off to a good start, and many of our programs are e-learning. We have 35% that are dipping the toe in, 24% off to a good start, and the same 24%, many of the programs in e-learning, and then we have 11% that are almost all of the programs are e-learning. So this question leads to another question for you, and that is, how many of you struggle when scoping projects? So again, 4 choices there. You're a scoping master, there is no struggle. Sometimes you miss things and get surprised along the way. Increasing the budget and timeline are frequent discussions. Or you don't scope. You just take a timeline and budget and kind of try and make it work, and you just don't scope. So take a minute or, well, a few seconds and select one of those. And Amanda, if you'll share with us.
Of course. I see answers are coming in fast and furious, so go ahead and make your selection before I close the poll. 3, 2, 1. And let's see what you guys said. Here we go, Michelle.
All right. Well, there's 7% of you, congratulations, who are scoping masters. Yay! Then we have 40% that sometimes miss things and get surprised along the way. 29% are increasing the budget and timeline that are frequent discussions that are occurring, and 24% of you don't scope. Okay, great. Good information that we have here, and let me just move this forward with our whole questions here, because today we're going to focus on what do you need to ask to uncover that information to scope your e-learning programs. So it really comes down to asking the right questions to uncover the right information. If the right information is not uncovered during the scoping process, then project surprises occur, and those surprises can impact expectations, timeline, budget, and morale. So the last few years, we've seen newer and more sophisticated tools and their updates that have come on the market, and that allows an e-learning course to be made in just a few hours, or if you want, spend a lot more time and budget to create a sophisticated virtual reality game-based program. And we're actually hearing in this day and age of gaming out there that a good percentage of our client audience expects to have the high engagement levels similar to that found in the gaming industry. Well, that's a pretty good obstacle to overcome, because the obstacle to creating that is usually time and budget. 2 things that we're going to talk about in this webinar. So our challenge as learning and development experts is to create engaging learning that captures the spirit of our audience, yet meets the timeline and budget provided. And in order to do this, we at the Training Associates, we focus on 10 key factors to determine the nature and scope of a program. So factor number 1, what is the goal, purpose, objective of the training? I mean, this one's the obvious factor out there, and I hope everybody's asking this factor. But you want to dig into that a little bit more. In other words, what do they want to accomplish with the program? Is the program strictly informational? Are they looking for a change in behavior? Is it part of a certification program? Where does this program fit in respect to other programs? Is it one small component of a larger program? Is it a standalone module? Or is it an entire program made up of multiple pieces? Once we know what the goal, purpose, objective of the training is, then we want to move on to factor number 2. And factor number 2 is, what is the estimated shelf life of the program? Do they expect it to be used for several years with no significant updates? Or are they thinking it's more of a temporary program that's expected to have significant changes over time, a lot of updates that's going to have to be done over that time? And or is it maybe a one-off program? It might be just available for a month, maybe 2 months. It's sort of a temporary program there to get some information quickly out. Asking this question gives an idea to the approach and design that could possibly be used. It's information that helps to guide estimates for time frame and budget. Again, factors we're going to get to a little bit later. Factor number 3, we're going to ask in just a minute because we have a poll question for you. And that's, of the e-learning programs you currently have, how much is new content and how much has been converted from other modalities? So 3 choices there. The e-learning content is almost entirely new, meaning you're having to go out, absolutely create that content. It's not written, it's not developed. You need to find subject matter experts to create that content for you. Or we adapt to nearly all our existing content for e-learning. You have a lot of it. It might be in instructor-led trainings. It could be in webinars. It could be just SME presentations here and there, or manager quick training, and you want to take that content and move it into e-learning, or you have a combination of the 2. So Amanda, what do you, what's our audience say on this one?
I can tell you they're very engaged because I can go ahead and close this poll and share the results with you. Almost everybody's answered. So let's see what they said.
Great. All right, so we have 24% that the e-learning content is almost entirely new material. All right, so you're having to go out and either have somebody write that or find that material for you. 16% that are adapting the current content they may have over into e-learning, and then 60% of you have a combination of the 2. Okay, fantastic. I'm sure you're asking, so why did we ask this question? Well, we're asking it because content truly is the start in scoping and developing programs. So this leads to factor number 3. And factor number 3 is, in what form is the current content? You want to find this out. So in other words, has it been signed off already, and is it ready to be handed over to you to be developed? Does the content need to be reviewed by a legal department? You absolutely need to ask that question and find out, because that can extend out a time frame substantially there. Or are you going to be expected to find and interview subject matter experts, either supplied to you through the organization, the business unit, or you need to go out and research that information and write that material and put it all together. The condition of the content, again, substantially impacts the time frame of the project and the budget. And speaking of content, we want to make sure you're asking factor number 4. Will the program need to meet specific compliance or regulation laws? Are they required by law to be 508 compliant? So someone shared with me a story that they were once in a final review process. All the way through. Everything's been developed, voiceover's been synced in, it's been recorded, you're in final review process. When the reviewer casually remarked, hey, I can't get access to closed captioning, where is that? Whoops, surprise, what do you mean closed captioning? That created a huge scramble at the tail end of a project, can you imagine? And I know it's happened. So it created frustration from both sides. A deadline was missed, and his budget had to be increased because we had to take that into consideration there, or they did. So it's an important factor that you need to ask. So that brings us to factor number 5. What type of media treatment is desired? Will they supply the graphics, or will you be expected to supply the graphics? Will there be custom graphics required? Do they have access to an image bank, or will you have to purchase a subscription to an image bank? Custom photos, are they required from a photo shoot? Will video be included? Will they have the video in complete form? So you don't have to edit or do anything, you just pull the video and put it into the e-learning. Or will you need to write, record, and edit the video? And if they want video, does it need to be alpha channel video? Do they have a branding standard that needs to be considered? And what about music at the opening or closing, or perhaps during reflection activities or items like that that you might have in your e-learning? It's important to get the details of what is desired up front, because it definitely has an impact on the timeline and the budget again. And we're halfway through the factors right now, so we have another poll question for you. Do you use VoiceOver in your e-learning? So your options, and this is a multiple select because I know you may use multiple of these. We don't include VoiceOver. We use voice actors or professional VoiceOver talent. We use semi-professional VoiceOver talent. We use an internal employee for voice talent, or we use computer-generated VoiceOver. And again, if you select we don't include VoiceOver, please share in chat why you don't include VoiceOver in your e-learning modules. And Amanda, just let me know when you think everybody's had an opportunity to answer, and let's take a look at that.
All right, I think they're pretty passionate about this one, so let's go ahead and see what they're saying.
Well, that's interesting. So we have a few of you that actually don't use VoiceOver. We have 13% that use voice actors or professional VoiceOver talent. Great. 7% use semi-professional VoiceOver, and this is where I thought the majority use an internal employee for voice talent. And then we have a small percentage, about 8%, that use computer-generated VoiceOver. Well, this brings us to factor number 6 that you want to be sure that you ask. And that is, what level of VoiceOver is desired? We want to know, will they record the audio and edit it and give that to you so it's all edited, you can just lay it in? Or will they supply the audio, but you need to edit, insert, and sync it? Do they want professional VoiceOver? We always have this discussion with our clients because professional VoiceOver can be expensive, and it can be a budget buster, as we call it. So is that a place where they can compromise there? Are they fine with VoiceOver that is not professional level, but is still good VoiceOver quality? Is the option of not having VoiceOver on the table? Occasionally, it's fine not to have VoiceOver in an e-learning. If it fits and everything works well, it's easy to follow without a VoiceOver, you don't have to have that on there necessarily. Is computer-generated VoiceOver acceptable there? So VoiceOver requirements directly impact budget. Many people really don't realize the cost of having that professional VoiceOver. But on the flip side, if you have someone who does not know what they're doing in terms of VoiceOver, you can seriously impact the engagement and results of the program. So if we're using internal VoiceOver talent, we want to make sure that they do know and understand what you're looking for in that VoiceOver and the quality that's required to not have that impact. And that's a factor that needs to be discussed and determined right up front when you're scoping a project. So this brings us to another poll question we have. Where do you currently house your e-learning content? In an LMS, an LCMS, a website, or other? And again, if you answer other, please share with us in chat where you house your e-learning content currently. And I know everybody's answering these really quickly. That's great. And so thank you so much for being so attentive. That's great. And Amanda, just let me know.
Yeah, this is your last poll question, so last opportunity to sound off before the Q&A coming up in just a little while. I think that prompted a couple of people, and I'm getting some open-ended here, but let's see what our results say, and then I can share those with you as you'd like.
Okay, so 73% of you are using an LMS. Here we have a little bit in the LCMS. We have about 15% on a website and 8% that are using other that way. So, and again, you might be wondering, why did we ask this question? Well, because it falls into factor number 7. And factor number 7, let's catch up here, and that is, where will the program be housed? You need to know and ask, where is the program going to be housed? Is it going to be in an LMS or an LCMS? If so, does the course need to be tracked or provide scoring? If using an LMS, what are the features of the LMS, or even the LCMS? What are the features of the LMS? Can the LMS create program courses that are housed separately? Can learners record videos and upload for critique or review to the LMS? These are really unique features that can be built into the program, but they don't have to be built into the actual e-learning module itself. So again, you can focus time and effort on other parts of the e-learning module and not have to worry about if it has features, those can be built into the LMS there. So the information gained from asking these questions can really help determine the approach, the design and development of the programs, again, impacting the timeline and the budget. And if it's built in a website, then you need to know that information, because that's information you need to be able to give to a developer so that they know what they're publishing for and what they're building for. So factor number 8 is, what is the desired format of the program delivery? So you know where you're going to deliver it, you've gotten that, but now we're going to ask, what is the desired format of the program delivery? Is it going to be downloadable offline? Will it need to be mobile friendly? Yes, people are still converting to DVD, or the little flash sticks there. At delivery, do they want the program in its published form or in the raw or source file state there? So what is the desired format of program delivery? So we've delivered 8 key factors, and we've saved those last 2 we talked about earlier and kept mentioning time and budget for the last. So factor number 9 is, what is the time frame for developing the project? By when must the project be in the system and ready to launch? And I don't mean delivering it to the client or to the business unit. You need to know when it needs to be in delivery format, final delivery format, so it's ready for the client audience to go. So if they say July 15th we need it delivered, clarify, is that when we deliver the materials to you and then you test and upload that way, or is that when you are making it available to your audience? So you want to make sure you get that date specified immediately. Is the time frame even realistic, given the answers to all the other factor questions? You've gotten a lot of information from the previous 8 factors. Is the time frame doable? Is it realistic? If it's not, how much wiggle room is there with the timeline? If there isn't a lot of wiggle room, does your client understand their responsibility for keeping the project on time? Have you explained that any miss of a timeline milestone, well, that results in the end date being pushed out in most instances, and any change in scope may necessitate a change in milestone and delivery date. So it has an impact. So make sure you're having that conversation that says, if we're on a tight timeline, here's the project plan, here are the dates, we're going to try and stick with these dates. We appreciate if you can also note in your calendars, these are the dates you'll receive for review, and these are the dates we need it back from you for review. Any missed time on that can affect the next milestone and can affect the delivery date ultimately. So you want to make sure you're having those conversations up front in that scoping process. That brings us to factor number 10, the last factor, and that is, what is the budget for developing the program? Is that budget a firm budget, or is there wiggle room? And how much wiggle room is there in the budget? You also want to know, what are their top requirements? You've asked 9 factors. You've got a lot of information right there. You may be thinking, whoops, I just found out their budget and we can't do everything they're asking for. So now you're saying, all right, here are the top requirements. What are they willing to compromise on potentially because the budget isn't there to hit the entire list of what has to happen? So there you start having the conversations of, here's what we could compromise, here's what we can focus on, here's an approach we could do rather than this one. And it fits in your budget much better, or maybe their budget, there's a little wiggle room, so we can extend that budget out there. So, and have you explained, again, that any change in scope can result in a potential change order that may impact the budget. So we use the 10 key factors to get all of this information. And we put those 10 key factors to consider into a handout that you can download. Now that we've shared the 10 key factors that we use when we are scoping programs and projects, we'd actually like to share some case studies with you and how we use these 10 factors in these case studies. So case study number 1 is a small growing business. This business came to the training associates for assistance in converting an in-person sales training workshop that was currently being offered into an online course. They had provided us with 60 typed pages of content that was used in the workshop, but it didn't include the activities. And their goal was, they really wanted those who took the online course to be able to complete the same type of exercises as was contained in the in-person course. They wanted to convert the course content into the online courses because they wanted to be able to free up time in the business in order to scale up the business. Now, the big factor here was, as a small business, however, there was a limited budget. So using the 10 key factors approach, we uncovered the following in our hour-long discussion with them. The goal: the learners would be actively engaged in material and able to participate in the activities just as they did in the instructor-led training workshops that they had. I'm not going to list out all of the objectives that we identified. That was later when we did the actual instructional design for the project. The shelf life, they wanted it for multiple years. The content, well, we had access to the 60 pages of typed content, but when we quickly reviewed it, it became apparent that it needed to be rewritten for e-learning format. And the activities were going to need to be adjusted to suit the online realm there. Compliance was not necessary. The media, well, we knew no videos were required there. We had some text. We were going to go with limited animation and interactivity, but we were going to focus a lot of our time on the custom images and illustrations. They did not want it game-based, but it did need to be branded to the company. They wanted professional voiceover, but the budget was limited, so we explained that their budget was not going to be able to accommodate that cost, so they settled and agreed upon semi-professional voiceover. It was housed in their LMS, and this was a critical uncovery that we did in the 10 key factor approach, because their LMS had some really interesting features that allowed learners to actually upload a video that they had taken, maybe of an elevator speech or a sales pitch, upload that video and allowed them at the business to review and critique it, provide that critique back, and then let that person see what that critique was. So very back and forth there. And this was great because this was something then that we didn't have to necessarily worry about building into the e-learning itself. We could have that as a standalone outside call to action activity. And I'll talk about that in our with what we proposed in just a second. It also allowed assessments that could be created separately outside of the e-learning and housed separately in the LMS. And that was great because the business themselves could then create those assessments. And again, that took time away that we didn't have to worry about in the timeline and budget, that they could do that and they didn't have to spend time on that. So the format of the delivery, they needed the source materials as well as published format. Their tracking was not important, and it was going to be in their LMS there. The time frame that they had given us was 3 months. There was a little bit of wiggle room. It wasn't a firm set date. There was just a little bit of wiggle room. But it was perfectly doable for this particular project. And as I said, the budget was limited there. So the solution that we proposed using the 10 factors, we were able to determine that the content could be broken down into small single topic modules. It included a performance support aid as well as a call to action activity. Each one of the modules did. The call to action activities would closely mimic what the workshop activities were, but we also knew that the content had to be rewritten and chunked out. So even though it was going to be divided into small single topic modules, we still had to rewrite that and make it e-learning content, e-learning voice allowed. So we needed to allow time and budget in order to accommodate that. Because the budget was a driving factor, we really looked to give the biggest bang by capitalizing on the features of the LMS, what I was talking about earlier, those features. So we decided that we could produce level 1 type modules. They had engaging graphics, low animation, low sync rate requirements. We were going to use those features of the LMS that we could in order to create the separate parts, things that the business could do on their own. We didn't have to do that. And then we could set it up in the LMS so that they download the module, they would watch it, they would download the performance support aid that would highlight what they just watched. They could complete the call to action activity, then finally take a short assessment. And then they could move to the next topic. No module or accompanying call to action required more than 30 minutes of a participant's time. We took that into consideration, and most of the time it really didn't require more than 20 minutes. We proposed keeping it short and focused. The information was provided to the learner. The learner was asked to analyze how they could use that in their current job, asked to apply what they learned in the current job, and there was no delay between getting the information then using the information immediately back on the job. We were asking them to do that in the call to action. And as I say, this cuts way down on that retention curve to oblivion. You know, I mean, we all experience it. We all have to deal with it and think about it when we design. You know, after a few days after attending something, you're not retaining as much as you usually do 10 minutes later. So ultimately, when we were finished with the project, 15 modules were created. They were about 10 minutes, give or take, in length. Each had a performance support aid as well as that call to action activity and an assessment. And the project was developed in about 330 hours. So if you break that down, I know some of you are probably pulling out a calculator. That's essentially 22 hours per module from start to finish. 4 resources were used to develop this: a graphic designer, our voiceover artist, semi-professional voiceover artist, a copy editor, and 1 project manager, instructional designer, and developer, all wrapped into one. So 4 resources. It is a level 1 because of the limited interactivities in the module, but it does have custom graphics. It has the voiceover. We kept it very straightforward and simple, but visually engaging for the learner. We kept the performance support aids and call to action simple as well, and you can see that on the screen. We did quick screenshots there. And the call to action activities really asked participants to role play scenarios, go find their manager or a colleague or a peer, role play, create checklists, have a dialogue, videotape themselves conducting a cold call or an elevator pitch, complete spreadsheets, those types of things that they use immediately on the job. The feedback from participants has been very positive. Our small business owner is extremely happy with the outcome because it's allowing that business to continue to scale up. And that was their ultimate goal, was to be able to move this successfully online and continue to scale up. on that business. So that's our case study number 1. Case study number 2 is actually a mid-sized healthcare company. And this healthcare company came to the training associates for assistance in converting a 4-hour morning onboarding program to the online e-learning. The purpose for this conversion was to allow their satellite areas to have the same type of onboarding experience as those who attended the in-person programs on the main healthcare campus. In this case, they had a very tight timeline, but they had finalized instructor-led training guides because the morning onboarding program was already developed and being successfully run as an ILT in person, but they needed it to be over onto online e-learning for the satellite campuses there. They did have a modest budget. So again, let's go through the 10 key factors quickly and find out what our conversation uncovered. We know that they said the budget was moderate and the time frame, well, I said it was tight. It was 6 weeks. The goal was to convert that 4-hour morning onboarding program, and here was the kicker. It included a 1-hour group game that was used in class. They wanted that to be converted over to a single-player online game, and they wanted all of that put into online modules. The shelf life, multiple years. The content, well, we had access to the content immediately. It was their finalized, signed off, instructor-led training facilitator guide, participant guide, the game boards, the marketing materials, all of the handouts that they were given in their classrooms. Everything was ready to go. So we could immediately jump on and look at that, what needed to be done, and take a look at that. The compliance, while they didn't need to be 508 compliant, any rules, regulations that way, they did want the script to be available. So we had to keep that in mind. The media, they actually had company videos that we needed to use. They were in final form. We didn't need to edit those. A lot of text, a lot of industry-specific images we had to go and find. They wanted the interactivities and the game. We needed to convert that in-person game to an online game, plus all of the handouts and materials that they had. Voiceover, they wanted professional level. It was going to be housed in their LMS, which they were not that familiar with because it was fairly new to them. The format of delivery, they needed the score and published format so it could be scored and tracked there, and they wanted the raw and source file as well. So down the line, if they needed to do any tweaking to it or make any updates, they could do those. As I mentioned earlier, the time frame was 6 weeks and the budget was moderate. Our biggest factor here was the time frame that we had to work with. So the solution that we proposed, looking at the materials provided, we determined that the content could in fact be broken down into 5 modules. Those modules were going to be between 10 to 40 minutes in length, the game being the longer piece there. We simply didn't know once we put it into single player where exactly it was going to fall time-wise. We knew it took an hour in person, but was it going to take the full hour as a single player to do that? So it was going to be dependent on the topic and the module being created on how long that was we estimated. We explained to our client that it was going to be a stretch, a big stretch, to meet the requested timeline of 6 weeks, given the complexity that we were looking at. And that timing was going to be everything. We also looked at the calendar and realized we had one big major holiday we were working in as well over that time frame. So we had to worry about were people going to be available there. So in other words, we explained to them that their reviews had to be immediate. People needed to be available weekday, weeknight, weekends to look at that information that we were asking and provide that information, or even if the reviews came in, we needed to know that they were available and they were going to turn those reviews right around in order to try and keep to that date. We also said that the expectation that we could not guarantee that all the modules would be delivered on that required date. We had to get into it and start developing that game to see how much custom programming, custom design work that had to be done, and the complexity level of where that was going to be. But we were going to try everything we could to try and deliver on that date if we could. But we would know by alpha review where we stood. We set the expectations. We communicated with them, and in the end, we actually did need an extra few days to deliver the one module. That one module was a level 3 complex single-player game that we had to develop, custom program, custom design. But all other modules, the 4 other modules, were delivered right on time on that time date that they were looking for. And those were all heavy level 2. They had interactivities, videos, interaction scenarios. It was all in there. This project absolutely demanded extreme levels of coordination and constant communication. The project was developed in about 550 hours over that, and it really came down to about 5 weeks. By the time everything got up and going, it was about 5 weeks, 550 hours. There were 12 resources that were used, 5 graphic design and developers, 1 professional voiceover artist, 1 copy editor, 2 project managers, and 3 instructional designers. And the project management hours were much more intense due to the nature of the scope of the project. It was tight, it was complex, and we wanted to make sure that we could deliver as soon as possible on that. We did have that conversation with the client, though, that while we could not guarantee that final delivery, there needed to be a backup plan in place. In other words, they still needed to deliver the in-person training that was going to happen, and in case we could not deliver on that final date. And we, in fact, did need just a few more days in order to test and make sure everything was running correctly in their system on that time frame. They were thrilled, though, with that, and that was fine. They knew we had set the expectation and been very clear up front. And in the end, they were extremely happy with the product, and they tell us that their employees are excited about it and they're getting good reviews from that. So we're very happy about that. We were very happy about the challenge that we had in trying to develop a complex level 3 module as well as the level 2s in a really short turnaround time frame there. So you can see a few of our screens that we took and up there on that we're sharing with you. Then we have also our last case study. And this client is a large Fortune 500 company, and they came to us for assistance in creating an across-the-board online onboarding program for all their employees. They had a cursory outline of 11 foundational topics that they wanted included, but they also had an idea that those topics would probably expand or more topics would be added to that. They just weren't sure yet. They were still investigating, still trying to lay this out. But they needed that content, at least the 11 foundational topics right now, in 2 months. The challenge here in that 2 months, we had 3 major holidays to work through, as well as end of year, close of business to work around. So what did our 10 key factors uncover in our conversation, that initial conversation? Well, the goal was to create that online onboarding program. They did not have one. They wanted one created. The shelf life, well, it needed to be multiple years. The content, they were asking subject matter experts to put together some PowerPoints with some notes in it, and they had some cursory outline. They had an idea where they wanted to go and what topics they wanted. They didn't have the content necessarily ready yet. The compliance was not required. Media, we knew, and they said that we had company videos that needed to be incorporated. Obviously, we needed some text, industry, again, specific images need to be used, interactivities, but it didn't need to be game-based because their LMS had some gaming factors in it where once you completed something, you could level up through the LMS. So we didn't have to worry necessarily about putting those game features in there, and that was good because it allowed us then to focus more on what is the content, what do we need to gather, and where is this going to go. The format of the delivery, source materials, as well as any score and publish format that they needed there. The time frame, again, 2 months, pretty tight time frame for this, and you'll hear why in just a second. The budget was flexible. Our initial proposal that we put was based on the information that we uncovered in our first conversation with those 10 factors. We proposed, due to the time frame, a basic level 1 or level 2 type modules, but that would be determined by the content once we had access to the content. We needed to see the content. We had topics, but that's all we really had there. The timeline was the most important factor. It couldn't move. It needed to be rolled out. The content then needed to be straightforward and simple in order for us to get those 11 topics, and also know that there were going to be additional topics most likely handed to us that we needed to develop and get into that time frame. We suggested using a template in order to keep everything pretty much straightforward and clean. We knew there were going to be multiple resources working on the project. And again, because we didn't have access to the content prior to our proposal, we went back to the industry standards, you know, the Chapman or the DD Inc. There. So we looked at the budget and the time frame and the hours and said, well, none of these modules are probably going to be an hour long. Most likely, looking at the topics, we're going to keep them between 15 and 20-minute modules, if not shorter there. And so if, you know, your average level 1 is 100 hours, let's shave some hours off of that, although it's not a one-to-one cutting of hours. There's still some things you still have to do with that. So we then proposed an estimation of time there with the budget, and knowing that the budget, they were going to have to be flexible in that budget, because if they added more topics, we were going to have to flex that budget out and be able to accommodate that within the timeline. Well, surprise, the project actually morphed from 11 topics to 32 topics with the same deadline. And we had to do much of the content writing based on some SME data provided that was cursory, I would say outline data. I mean, there was some data there, but it wasn't full. So we were really looking at filling in that content. And in this instance, it became great to have that flexible budget, because we needed to bring on more resources in order to do this. And the project was morphing into what we all call the large scope creep. We were warned about it ahead of time, it came into it, and when we saw that maybe 32 topics was going to be untenable in that time frame, we proposed, again, a phased approach. Looked at the topics, had the conversation, and said, let's do these 25 topics, and we can assure you we can have those done. You can roll those out. These other 7 topics and growing, maybe we need to put that into phase 2. We approached it that way, and the client was very happy with that approach. So we stuck with phase 1 and focused on that. That program was developed in 740 hours. That gave it about 25 to 40 hours a module, and most of the modules were 15 to 20 minutes apiece, and they ranged between basic level 1 to basic level 2 modules. 8 resources were ultimately used there: 1 graphic designer, 1 voiceover artist, 1 copy editor, 1 project manager, and 5 instructional designer developers. We tried as much as possible to use pre-built interactions. This kept our timeline down and the time that we needed in for development by using some of the pre-built interactions along with templates that were built, so we could keep the look and the feel and the voice very similar all the way through this. We were basically turning modules over weekly, if not every other week, to be reviewed and given to them to put into their LMS to test to make sure. We were, in fact, able to deliver on time all of the phase 1 modules, and they were able to roll that out as they wanted to. And we continue to work with this Fortune 500 company as they build their onboarding program. We're in phase 2 and quickly moving to phase 3 right now with all of the e-learning programs that are being put and built to the online learning program. So there's our 3 case studies using the 10 factors and the information that we uncovered, and how that helped us to quickly scope the project, determine the timeline and a budget, and keep those timelines and budget pretty much on track there. So, and any expectations, we voiced immediately in those upfront conversations, so everybody was very clear about the program. So I'd like to turn this over to questions that you might have for us. Marlene and I would be happy to field any questions that you have about scoping projects for e-learning programs, any of the factors, the case studies, that way. So Amanda?
Excellent. All right. If you would like to ask Michelle or Marlene a question, go ahead and type them in your chat window now. We've got about 10 minutes for question and answer, and that's just a perfect amount of time. So this first one comes from Cecilia, who says, what's the best approach for dealing with a client who has an unrealistic timeline or budget?
Marlene, do you want to take that one, or do you want me to take that one?
I actually think it would be great for you to take it.
All right, so it's transparency. It's having the conversation up front in the scoping process. Those 10 key factors that we discussed really get a lot of that information right out on the table so that you can say, if X happens, then Y will happen. And here is why that's going to happen. So it's really about having the very upfront conversations so that your business unit or your client truly understands what impacts the timeline, what impacts the budget, and then how it impacts that so that they can be brought down to a realistic time frame. There's nothing worse than working together and then a client and learning that a client is expecting one thing and you're delivering another. You don't ever want to have that happen at all. You want to make sure that up front you're setting the expectations, and those 10 key factors really reveal expectations that way. And that's why we use them when we scope for our programs. Great questions. Thank you. Any other questions?
Question comes from, this one's from Pat. She says, when creating e-learning modules, do you structure them so that learners can click through, or do you delay the time for each slide to force them to stay focused?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. And I actually don't like to force them to sit on a slide and set it so that they have to listen to everything before they can move to the next slide and click next. I think that can sometimes stymie a learner and make them frustrated. And the moment you make a learner frustrated, they immediately stop learning, or the learning becomes much less effective there. But that being said, we have worked with clients who insist that we do not allow the next button to work until they've clicked everything and had everything on the screen and they've heard the voiceover or they've read every piece of information. That's fine. I have the conversation with the client and say, you know, that sometimes can create a frustration that shuts down. But I also understand the client side of that, and that is sometimes they go, yeah, we just have them click next, 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 next to get it over with, and they really don't listen to this important information. So it's a really fine balancing act, and it's really about finding out the underlying situation of what are they seeing a lot of people doing. Is it they click next, 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 and they're not truly taking the information in? Then maybe you keep the screens shorter in length and duration, and you have more screens, so it's a little bit more active as they progress through the module. Have those interactions, the click to reveals, the reflection exercises, those types of the scenarios. Have those in there so that they're forced to look at those information and interact with the screen. So it's not the passive learning, but it's the active learning that's taking place there.
Excellent. This next question is from Jim. How do you identify and manage scope creep?
I have my answer. Marlene, do you want to chirp in with yours?
Yeah, I mean, as far as managing a scope creep, I think it's, you know, ultimately just constant communication with the customer and understanding and making sure that they understand really what they can expect from us. You know, once that scope creep is identified, is just making sure that they understand what the risks are related to that scope creep.
And I'd actually like to add on to that. I always want to know who are my stakeholders, who are my reviewers, who all is going to be reviewing the module, because I want them in at the beginning. I don't want somebody brand new reviewing suddenly at beta or final review, because that's oftentimes where scope creep can suddenly show up with a reviewer comes in and says, oh, hey, wouldn't it be nice to have this? Or we need to have this. This wasn't covered. That all needs to happen right up front. When you're doing those reviews, writing scripts, doing storyboards, everybody who's going to be in final review needs to be in that upfront review so they see what's being covered and how it's going to be covered that way. Again, it's all about the communication as well. What defining in your design analysis and design levels, what is going to be covered. And even though you may get to alpha, that's fine. You may decide during alpha that you go back and there are a few things that need to be added or subtracted, and it's going to cause a little bit of scope creep, and you might have to adjust. Is it a lot of scope creep that's going to push out the milestones, or can you absorb that scope creep into your project plan already? And I always try and allow a little extra time in projects for some scope creep, but when you have the conversations up front during that scoping and you're uncovering those factors and you're getting that can manage a lot of the scope creep initially, and making sure your reviewers, everybody who's going to review, is in that review process up front there. So that's how we tend to manage scope creep. Not saying it doesn't happen. It happens to the best of us. It does.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. This question comes from Will, and he says, do you have any suggestions for what will lengthen shelf life?
Michelle, do you want to take that one?
In this day and age of instant gratification, everything needs to be changing, everything's rapidly changing. It truly is a hard one. But you want to stick with classic designs. Don't make sure you're sort of moving into what's hot right now, because that can go what's not hot right now very quickly. Stick with your classic designs. Make sure it's branded to them, to their colors, to their image. Their marketing departments or your business units, they've done a lot of that legwork for you. You don't have to worry about that. Match it in there. You know it's going to have some shelf life there. You want to keep it interactive and interesting. And it's key to getting those interactions in there. Although I'll say in this day and age of microlearning, that's great. And I don't think microlearning is going away, frankly. I think it's always been here. We've just renamed it and repackaged it as, here's one topic, here's in 5 minutes you're going to learn. It's kind of like a news story. They always say 2 minutes and you get 30 seconds intro, 30 seconds that, and then you tell your story in there. And we all learn from that, right? So microlearning, I really like microlearning and the approach there. I also think what you can do with shelf life is put in those, what I call the call to action type activities, where they're really having to use it on the job right now, thinking about what's current in their job, what do they have to go back and immediately start using that they can. That keeps it fresh and current, because if their job changes, then you're going to have to change the entire module out that way. So those are a few of my thoughts on keeping it fresh and current.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Michelle and Marlene, for answering all of those questions. There were definitely more. Unfortunately, we've run out of time for today, but something tells me that the wonderful folks over at TTA will be getting in contact with you to answer your questions. I did want to say thank you one last time to Michelle and Marlene. It was really great having you here, and based on all the comments I'm seeing coming in, you did an excellent job explaining today's topic and gave people a lot of actionable items that they can go back to their desk with. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Amanda, for having us, and everyone for spending this hour with us. We hope you have some good takeaways from it.
Absolutely. And just a reminder, we do have a downloadable asset available for all of you that attended today. Be sure to download that before exiting the webcast. Training Industry will be sending a brief survey out about this webinar to you shortly. We ask that you just take a few minutes to let us know your thoughts on this and other webinars you'd like to see in the future. And then just a reminder, to learn more about TTA's expert L&D talent and services, please visit us at www.thetrainingassociates.com. Additional questions about today's webcast or TTA services can be directed to info@ttacorp.com. So please get in touch, and we'd love to hear from you.
Excellent. If you'd like to join us for some upcoming webinars, please check out trainingindustry.com webinars page. I know coming up on September 21st is your leadership team measure up. Should be a great event. Check out that and many more on our website. Of course, we'd love to see you in person, either at our Training Industry Conference and Expo or possibly at a Certified Professional in Training Management course. Of course, if you aren't able to join us in person, you could also get your certification virtually. Today's event does pre-qualify you for 1 credit hour by ISPI and towards your recertification of CPTM. Again, one last time, Michelle and Marlene, it was really great having you here. And of course, thanks to TTA, the training associates, for sponsoring today's event, and to all of you for attending. We'll see you back here next time. Bye-bye.